Hi, I'm Cameron Bonsey. I'm the Director of Marketing for Coast of Maine Organic Products, and I'm here today with Felicia Newman on Three Dog Farm. You got a beautiful place here.
Thank you.
And I know you love to garden, and I know you got this mine that's got all this stuff going on in it.
Yeah.
But you and I really helped to develop the Stonington Growers Mix, which is developed specifically for growing a cannabis plant.
It is. Yep.
And you did a lot of research. Tell me a little bit about the research when we decided to do it.
So there wasn't a whole lot of published, like a traditional plant that you would grow on a farm, like there's a lot of data out there that you can go look up, like extension offices have done all this research on what it exactly needs, and where the situation legally with cannabis was like there's not a lot of published information about the specifics. So I went and dug around and got every single book that I could find and read everything that I could find that was published, because you can get anything on the internet.
So you did get anything on the internet,
Yeah.
and you used a couple other sources, and of course your own background in chemical engineering, and you're an organic farmer
Yep.
and a caregiver,
Yeah.
so you know this stuff.
Yes.
It's inside you. What I like to talk about is the plants as people. All right, in the cannabis world, they refer to their plants, they're always talking about their girls, right? So you got your girls, and if you're raising kids, you want the culture to be correct.
Yep.
So what we've been able to do is take our lobster compost, which is a very well-known compost blend that people were using for cannabis, and then we said, okay, how are we going to make this easy? How are we going to take care of that girl to get her as healthy as possible? And what are we going to put into it? So you started with lobster compost.
That's right.
What's great about lobster compost for a cannabis plant?
So calcium and chitin for certain.
Yep. So we got calcium and chitin, we got a wonderful environment for a cannabis plant. Then you're reading stuff, and it's like, hey man, how do we make this a better culture? How do we get more diversity? How do we tell that plant how to grow?
Diversity being the key word
Yep.
in your soil.
So, and I think that's one of the things that people that are hanging over their plants, feeding them all the time,
Yeah.
like
hovercraft,
the
yeah.
hovercraft, the overprotective parent.
Yeah.
We're trying to create a space where the plant learns to feed itself.
That's right.
And become independent.
Exactly.
So you sit there and say, okay, we got lobster compost. This is a great growing medium, and then tell me about the other stuff you added to it.
Yeah, so we wanted to include kelp. I mean, that's one of my favorite things, the micronutrients. It's just like a vitamin for your plants. So that's in there. I mean, backing up a little bit, like when you grow in a container, it really doesn't matter if it's a cannabis plant or if it's one of my cauliflowers. Like you need to provide everything that plant needs in that pot, or you're going to have trouble.
Right.
So the diversity, like you mentioned, is really key. And so kelp, lobster meal, mycorrhiza, all the beneficial bacteria and fungi that comes in with the compost, alfalfa meal. We have quite a list on there. Dehydrated
We got
hemp
fishbone meal.
Fishbone meal is one of the keys.
Yep.
Because in particular, at the budding phase of the plant, you need a lot of phosphorus.
So then we added also cocoa fiber, peat, and perlite. So you develop the soil that's got a ton of biology in it, and it drains well, and it's like this great place for that plant to just go,
The
hey
happy
man,
place.
I'm happy. This is perfect for me, right?
Yep.
But there's only so much biology, even though we've got all that diversity. I talk to people, and I'm like, hey, yeah, you grow in a 15-gallon container. You don't need anything else. And everybody goes, I don't grow in a 15-gallon container. So then, you know, this is a 15-gallon container right here.
The big one.
That's a big one.
Yep.
People are usually tight on space.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people will grow in a 3-gallon container. And there's a lot of containers in between, 5, 7,
yeah.
10, and beyond. So then we have to be able to say to them, how do you grow? How are you raising that girl, right?
Right.
And what kind of cycles do you go to? So if let's say it's a 5-gallon container, just give somebody an overview of what your instincts would tell you to help them feed that plant.
Well, how long are they going to veg?
It's a good question. That's a good question.
That's
you
the
tell,
first question.
You tell me what kind of I know there's not an average veg cycle, but when you're growing as a caregiver a plant, how long would you be
30
vegging?
days,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, so you can get really big plants if you veg for a really long time, and then just by switching the lighting hours, you can switch over to bud or flower. If you veg for a long time, you're going to consume whatever is in that pot, right? So the longer you veg, the more you're going to consume. So fertilizer in general, you can think of it like marbles in a jar. You can only fit so many in a certain size, and then the plants are going to consume them. And so you have to be cognizant of that based on how many, or thinking about how much time you're vegging versus how much time you're budding. Are you transplanting in between those stages? Are you transplanting beforehand? And are you adding any nutrients along the way? And so like all of that, those are all the pieces to the puzzle.
So I come to you and I say, man, I'm going, my girls are looking good. I just started them. I want to transplant into a 5-gallon container. I'm going to veg for 30 days. And I'm going to grow in Stonington. Where would you direct them from there? Just I know
So
that
what
all
size
kinds of-
container?
5-gallon.
5-gallon.
Yep.
So that's probably about 30 days
Yep.
worth of growing. And then if you're going to leave them in that 5-gallon container, that's just slightly bigger. Like this is a 3.
Yep.
So it's only a little bit bigger than this.
Yep.
And it's really, you can do 2 different ways that you can add more fertilizer. You can take a dry granular, or you can take liquid fertilizer.
Yep.
And if you're going to use a dry granular with a really small container, you only have a small surface area that you can then scratch that into. So the larger the container, actually, the easier it is to use a granular. But the smaller it is, you might want to lean towards like the liquid feed side.
Okay. So I know there are companies out there that have these grand lists of fertilizers. I mean, there are a lot. We're trying to keep it simple. Correct. So we're trying to say, go back to the compost base, go back to the great biology, go back to understanding the size of the container, and then gently just move this plant, move this girl along.
Only what they need. Like,
only
let's
what
not
they
go
need.
crazy.
Because they're also going to figure out where to find the food. So in the smaller plant, the smaller container, you're suggesting a liquid.
Yeah,
right?
it would be easier. Yeah.
So we do have some liquid squid, and we have a couple of different liquids. But if somebody was going to had a smaller container, knew they were going to need some more biology, liquid squid, kind of the components of that. What makes liquid squid great for a cannabis plant?
So the NPK of that is 230. So there's a little bit of nitrogen. That's that first number, the 2.
Yep.
The 3, the middle number is phosphorus, and then 0 is potassium. So the potassium is going to be in the soil already from the kelp that we add in there. And the major consumption units as plants are growing in vegetative state is the nitrogen, which is that first number, and the bud phase is the phosphorus, which is the middle number. So you can actually use this in the transition from veg to bud and be very successful with that.
So we dilute this at about 1 ounce per gallon.
Yep.
And I've used this before. I used this 2 years ago with an outdoor grow. And I pretty much fed them almost every other water.
Yeah, you can. The 1 ounce per gallon is a pretty dilute solution. So you could do that. You could do that every watering. In particular, because the cocoa in the base is going to retain moisture, and if you don't have a lot of runoff, you're not going to lose a lot of your soluble nutrients. So like that dilute, like easy does it, constant flow kind of thing.
That's awesome. And then we also have our Stonington Blend plant food.
Yes.
I like this.
Yeah, that's pretty easy to use too, actually. For a granular.
And that has a nice NPK. That's a 524.
So that's veg feed.
Yep. And it's got the lobster meal in it. High in the calcium and the chitin.
You got it.
The kelp meal that's going to give that little girl a nice little yummy vitamin,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Over
Yeah.
60 micronutrients, and then the worm castings, which is another nice burst of nitrogen there.
Yep.
This is a great fallback product for a lot of things, but it's
is.
great for the veg phase
Yeah.
of cannabis.
If you're vegging for a long time, that's a wonderful product. Yep.
And then the budding phase. So we've gotten the plant, whatever size container, into that phase where they're teenagers now. Hormones are going nuts. They're eating
Yep.
everything in sight. They're growing tall. They're
They're
filling
emptying
out.
the refrigerator.
Yeah. So exactly what's happening. And then we're telling them, all right, at this phase, you might need,
Fishbone meal.
why?
So phosphorus is real high in this. There is some, like 513.0 is the NPK of this product. And so there is a little bit of nitrogen, but the phosphorus is key in this product. So bud, phosphorus, big buds.
So we have in our smaller line with the basic parenting practices that we're laying out, we really have a complete line that can actually take your cannabis plant or somebody else's cannabis plant from a seedling to harvest. It's going to be the strongest, healthiest plant they can get. THC and CBD levels will probably be a little bit higher. You don't have to worry about things like heavy metals.
Exactly.
And you don't have to worry about potentially something that might make somebody ill.
Right.
Approved for organic growers, it's the best soil that you can get for growing a cannabis plant. Stonington Blend Growers mix, you can find it at Hydro Store, your local independent garden center, or you can give Cameron a call. I will hook you up, man, anytime.